Morning,
did
Bob.
not actually own the land, the buyer could bring his bikurim, the lessor could bring the bikurim and could recite the parsha. Okay? And Reish Lakish says, maybe, of course he had to bring the bikurim, but he did not recite the paragraph because he was concerned that it didn't really, that the nutrients from the soil affected the plant, so it wasn't fully the lessor's plant. Rabbi Yochanan Omer maybe the Kaire he brings and he recites because Kinyan Paris, Kinyan Haguf Dami. If you own the fruit, then you own the stalk and the branch and whatever that it grew on, and you're not concerned with the fact that the nutrients came from someone else's property. V'reish lekish omer maybe the enakare you bring the fruits, of course, but you do not read kinyan peres lav kinyan haguf dami, that the fruits are yours because you worked for them and you paid money to get the land to grow them. But the actual plants derive their nutrients from their soil, and they're considered more the soil owner's plants. Okay? But Vitzricha, we have to explain both of these opinions. If you only talked about the idea that he was, where you could actually lease the land after Yovel's over, you could lease the land only for a period of time, and the guy would only have the right to use the land. So in such a case, Bahahika Amar Reish Lakish, that's when Reish Lakish would say you do not read the paragraph, that when the buyer acquires the land, loosely speaking, adaite the perikonachis, what he knows that he actually knows, it may be even in the document, that he's only acquiring the right to produce fruit or produce on that land. But in the case before Yovel ended, the adaite, the gufe konachis, he was intending, even though he knew he had to get it back, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he was intending to acquire the whole thing. The lease was on the land as well as on the right to use the land. So Ema Maida Leila Rabbi Yochanan, maybe Rabbi Yochanan would acknowledge that you do have to read the paragraph. The Itmar Baha, and if we only discussed back then in the Yovel period, the transfers of land, Baha Ka Rabbi Yochanan, I might have said that that's when Rabbi Yochanan says you do read the paragraph. Avul Baha, but in modern times, meaning in Mishnaic times, where they had ownership of land, they did live in Israel, but there was no more Yovel. Then, maybe Rabbi Yochanan would acknowledge to Reish Lakish that, and therefore, tzricha, you need both views, and you have to repeat the background of the argument. Toishma. Now we're going to try to back up Rabbi Yochanan with prices. Toishma. Hakaine ilan v'karka'o. If you buy the tree, if let's say Reuven has 100 acres of land, I live next door in my 100 acres, but and he has a couple of trees right on the border. They're on his side of the line. So I say to him, Reuven, I want to go into the date business. Can I buy your 2 trees from you? But I also want to buy the root ball. I want to buy the soil that the roots are in so that I own the source of nutrients. Okay? Maybe the correct. Then if I bring those fruit to Yerushalayim, I would obviously read the paragraph. Okay?
What
So
does the root ball have to do with your ownership?
if I only own the tree, this is what we've been discussing for 2 days. If I only own the tree, the argument could easily be that how are water and nutrients reaching the tree?
It's like a right of way, like the right of way.
No, what you have, all right, you have a right of way, you have the right to plant your grain, but the nutrients in that grain come from Schwartz's land. So I want to obviate that problem. I want to buy the land immediately around the tree. So now it's my ground as well as my tree.
Right.
And I give the nutrients are mine. So I definitely own the tree. So I can read. Yep. Okay, that's the argument. Now, the problem.
We had an argument more before, a tree that bends over, whether it's getting it from the air on this one side
or from the ground, but we paskin it's from the ground, and all along in this Gemara we're assuming it's from the ground. All right, now, so we made that statement. The problem is the brisa doesn't have a date. Okay, so what are we talking about in this brisa? Bisman she'ein hayovel noeg. We're talking about nowadays, meaning in the Mishnah's time, when there is no Yovel. So the buyer recites because now there's no returning the land. It's not a lease, it's a purchase. And presumably it'll be in his family till Mashiach comes and they restore Yovel. So another brisa, Tashma, this is again to back up Rabbi Yochanan. If I buy 2 trees in Schwartz's property, and it doesn't say anything about the underlying soil, all I bought were the trees and the right to leave them there. So here, Bob, you bring, obviously, but you do not read because you do not really own the tree. You only own the appearance of the tree. The nutrients are coming from the guy's soil. Okay? Shlosha. But now, let's think about this brisa. Brisa specifically says 2 trees. So the implication is if I bought more than 2 trees, then by some magic, I would be more the owner of them. Okay? Shloisha, the implication says 2, is that if I bought 3, maybe the Kore I would read. So now, even though the land, and if this is before the land goes back, so let's say this is while there was still Yovel, so I was just leasing. Nonetheless, it's considered that I'm enough the owner of the tree itself, not of the land. All I bought were the trees.
That's if you buy 2 trees, you don't buy the land.
Correct. Very good. Correct. But that's okay. So, but the Gemara doesn't go there. What the Gemara says is we're only talking about post Yovel, after Yovel ended. So there's no question. It's as if he's acquired the nutrients too. All right. Vahashta, the Omer of Chista. But now we're going to argue with those 2 brises. Vahashta, the Omer of Chista, Machlokes b'Yovel Sheni. We're talking about only, here's the thing. Yehoshua divvied up the land. He gave parcels of land to each Shevet, and the Shvatim divvied them up among their members of the Shevet. And somebody said, in 50 years, any land you've sold will revert to the family that has it today. So, okay, somebody said that. But until it actually happens, Everybody has a doubt in his mind. Nobody ever heard of such a thing before. In Egypt, when a guy sold land, it was sold. So until they actually went through a Yovel, in everybody's mind, there was this huge doubt that it would really ever happen. Okay? Machlokes beYovel Sheni. So we're making this distinction after we already have proof positive that Yovel does happen. But before the second Yovel, we didn't know that. In other words, we created this pattern of Yovel. It was in the second 50-year period that these discussions take place. Aval Yovel Rishon. But in the first 50 years that the Jews had the land in Israel, Divrei Hakol, maybe B'Kori. Everybody, whoever bought the land, whoever owned the land, whoever sold land to someone else, in all cases, the bringer also recited. The Akati lo samich adaito, because nobody was really sure that Yovel would happen and the land would revert. So even though it's technically a lease, you assumed it was you would have permanently getting it. That was in your mindset. Lo kasha, so there's really no problem reconciling Reish Lakish with the two Mishnayos that we just earlier. Okay, ha the Yovel Rishon, when he said you do read, it was because it was the second 50 years of the Jews owning the land. And ha the Yovel Sheni, and when he says you do not read, it was after the first Yovel when it was apparent that the land really would revert, because it did so. Okay. So Lema Katanoi. So let's now, we've been talking about memories. We've been talking about Amoraim, discussing what the halacha is and was it different when there was Yovel and today, as far as reading the paragraph. Maybe this was an ancient argument that was an argument from Tanoim, at least 100 years or more before the Amoraim were discussing it. Now, this is an interesting case. A fellow doesn't wait for his father to die. He buys land from his father while his father was still alive. Okay? And then the hektisha, he donates that newly acquired land to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, his father's still alive. And then after he turns it over, the title over to the Beis Hamikdash, his father dies. So Menayin Shitehei Lefan of Besaida Achuza. Why would we think, where you have a pasuk, that we would think that since his father died, he sort of retroactively inherited the land? And therefore, the Beis Hamikdash would have to give it back, actually give it to a Kohen. We'll see in a minute. Talmud Lomer, there is a pasuk that says, Im es soda maknaso asher lo mesaida achuzasoi. If you acquire land that is not part of your ancestral heritage land, okay, and the interpretation is soda she'ena ru'uya liyo soda achuza. This land is not considered legitimately part of your ancestral heritage. So if a Yehudi buys from a Shimoni, obviously it goes back. It can't be part of his ancestral heritage. Okay? So what's the case over here? We're excluding this case where the boy bought it from his father and gave it to the Beis Hamikdash, because it is fit to have to become his ancestral land. When his father dies, he inherits it. If he buys it from his father and gives his father $1,000, so then, assuming, keep it simple, it's only one kid, Then he inherits the $1,000 and the land was his, but it's part of the piece of land given to that family at the time of Yehoshua. Okay, Divrei Reb Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. That's the opinion of Reb Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Reb Meir Aimer, Minayan the Lokeach Soda Me Aviv, Umeis Aviv, if the father dies first, the Achar Kach, Hakdisha, the man gives the land to the Beis HaMikdash after the father dies. Minayan Shitehei Lefan of Besoda Achuza. How do we know that for sure it's considered family heritage land? Because he bought it before the father died, and now the father died, so he inherited it, so to speak, before he gave it away. Okay? So now, Talmud Lomer im esoda maknoso asher lo misoida who's also, if he had sanctified field that he bought from somebody else and it was not ancestral, soda she'enis soda achuza, then it was definitely a field that's not ancestral. Okay, Yotzezu, to exclude this case of buying it from his father and then his father died, Shehi Soida Achuza is definitely ancestral. Okay, V'ela de Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. Now let's go back to Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon, who said the father died after he gave it away. Okay, so at the time he had it, when he gave it away, it was merely purchased land. They would agree that after the father, that they gave it away after the father died, that it is ancestral, but they would argue lo tzricha kra. It's so logical, you wouldn't even need a pasuk. My love, b'hakamifligi. So here has to be the underlying distinction between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon. The Rebbe Meir Savar Kinyan Peiros Kinyan Haguf Dami. So when that the ownership of the fruit means that you effectively own the plant itself. So Rebbe Meir would argue that it's as if it were a complete and total real purchase. But in this case of the father buying it, even when Yovel was in effect, Bamises Avhu the lo Yoris Velomide. When the father died, if this was the only land the father owned, and if the son bought the land lock, stock, and barrel, he owned the land effectively because he owns the nutrients that the plant gets. Then when the father died, he couldn't inherit anything. Maybe metaltalin, but there's no land left. He bought it all from his father. The Hilkach, Mesaviv Achar Kach Hakdisha. So if his father dies first and then he gives it away, Tzarech Kra, he's required to read, because nevertheless, the pasuk says it's ancestral. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Savrei, but they hold Kinyan Peiros Lav to Kinyan Aguf Dami. He didn't really buy the land; he only leased rights to use the land. Obaha b'misas aviv hashtahu deka yoris, and it was only when the father died that he actually inherited the land. And now the Hilkach Meis Aviv Yachar Kach Hikdisha Lo Tzricha Kra. So now it's clearly his land, because it's, I mean, if he bought it, he bought it. If he didn't, he inherited it. It's clearly his land. You don't need a puzzle to tell me that it's his land. So ki itzrich kra. So why do we have these psukim? Lehakdisha v'achar kach meis aviv hu ditzricha. We need the pasuk for the circumstance. A, there is Yovel. B, he gave it away first. and then the father died. So that's where we have a machlokes Tanayim, whether or not he really owns the land or not. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak li'aylam emalach. I could certainly tell you the truth of the matter is, ba'alma kasavre Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. And normally speaking, they say generally, kinyan peres bekinyan haguftami. They do agree that you do acquire, whatever that means, the land temporarily, but nonetheless you acquire it. Okay, but in our case, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon kra ishkachu ledorish. They found the pasuk that they could interpret. Okay, lichtav rachmana, had the pasuk only wanted to exclude land where it was given away after the father died, then the pasuk should have different wording. The pasuk should have said, "Im esayde maknaso asher lo achuzaso." If you acquire a field that is not family heritage field, okay. So what does that mean? My misoda achuzaso, field that is family. In other words, what does the pasuk mean? Okay, so their interpretation was soda she'ena re'uya lios soda achuza, land that isn't considered in the geder of inheritable land. It would never be able to inherit it.
And this could be.
Yotzazu, to exclude this transaction between father and son, because in the normal circumstances, he wouldn't have bought it, he didn't have inherited it, or he bought it and the father died and he inherited it, the rights to pass it on forever and keep it in the family. Okay. Amar Reb Yosef. Reb Yosef has a new take on this. He loved the Amar Reb Yochanan Kinyan Paris Kinyan Haguf Dami. If Reb Yochanan did not explicitly express his opinion that if you buy the rights to plant on the ground, you acquire the essence of the ground. In other words, it's a real purchase, although it reverts after time. It's not a lease, it's a time limited purchase. Okay? I would have been so confused about halachas that I wouldn't even been able to walk in, take my hand or my feet into the temple. Okay? The Omer Rav Yasi, because Rav Asi, quoting Rav Yochanan, Omer Rav Yochanan, now, Reuven, Shimon, let's start, are sons of a man. The man dies. Now the man's estate has to be divvied up between Reuven and Shimon. But if you gave them each their druthers, if they each could write a secret piece of paper, what do you want? You'll find both of them wanted the piece of land that was the most fertile. And you'll find none of them wanted the swamp in the southwest corner. So what the Beis Din has to do, or they do privately, is come up with an equitable division of the land. So maybe the line would be drawn a little bit deeper into the very good field to account for the fact that the swamp is not, it can't be used for agriculture. So effectively, initially, each one owned, one molecule of soil here is mine and one molecule of soil here is my brother's. And yet when we divided it up, we did a brera. I'm keeping this half, I'll be satisfied with that. You'll keep that half, you'll be satisfied with that. But it's not 50-50 usually, it's 42-58, whatever it is. The Omer Rav Asi, Omer Rav Yochanan, ha'achen shacholku, when the brothers split up the inherited land, they're considered purchasers because I bought all those molecules in the undivided soil, the grains of sand in the undivided soil from my brother, and he bought all the grains of sand on his side from me. And that's how the basis on which we split it up. So the implication is that in the 50th year, both found all the plots of land that all the brothers and all the grandchildren, etc., have had for a period of years get tossed back into the estate and get redivided. So they return to the initial state of the family owned the whole integrated parcel. Okay, that's what Rav Asi quoting Rav Yochanan. So now using, well, they each bought it, you can resolve the issues of Rav Yochanan. If you try to say that Rav Yochanan holds that buying the right to use land doesn't mean you're actually buying the land, you don't actually own the field's essence, our scroll says, Lo mishtachas ma'aseh b'churim, then you would know nobody after the very first door died would be able to bring bikurim, because everybody is a purchaser from the estate. Nobody actually received a discrete, unless there was an only son of an only son of an only son, all the way back to Yeshua, which is what the Gemara says. Then he would be able to read. Elachad Barchad Ad Yehoshua ben Levi, that would be the only guy who would be able to read. So that's, now we have a better understanding of what's going on here. Amarava Kro Umas Nisa Messiah Leresh Lekesh. We had both a pasuk and a brisa that backed up Reish Lekesh. Kro, what's the pasuk? B'mispar shnei tevuos yimchor loch. According, when you purchase land or lease land, you have to figure out how many years are there between now and Yovel, subtract Shemitah years, and if it's $1,000 a year and it's 9 years, you would pay $9,000 for the land. That's literally from the count of the years of grain production, you sell the land based on that value. That implies that the quote sale or lease is only for a specific number of years. Masnisa, we have a brisa that backs up Reish Lakesh. The Sanya, Bechor Natal Pishnayim, the oldest son gets a double chunk. Besoda Achuza the Aviv the Yovel, and we're talking now. Remember, we divided up. Now there's an elder son and say 2 siblings. So after it's all returned to the estate on the Yovel year, the oldest son gets 50% and the 2 other children get 25%. Again, adjusted so that it's a value rather than strict acreage. And again, they're like buyers, okay? Now, Amar Abaye, Naktinan, we have an ancient tradition. Baal b'nichse ishto, when the husband gets involved. All right, nichse maluk, the wife retains title, but the husband acquires the right to utilize the soil, to grow crops, to make a profit. If it's an apartment house, he gets the right to collect the rent, etc. Okay, now what happens if there's a law case? What happens if the neighbor says, this is one of many possibilities, a bunch of teenagers smoked some pot and moved the boundary marker. Mrs. Schwartz's land, the first 20 feet of Mrs. Schwartz's land is really mine. So that would wind up in Besdin. So the husband has to ask his wife permission to represent her in Besdin, because even though his is the name on the suit, she is really the titular holder of the land. So she has to give permission. The Naktinin, we have a tradition. Baal ben Nichsei Ishto, a man who gets involved in litigation with his wife's property, Tzorech Harsha, has to get her permission. However, what if the dispute is over who owns this little strip of wheat? And he sues saying, you harvested my wheat and I want to get compensated. And then it turns out that in the course of the suit, the claim that it's his wheat is because he also has a claim on the underlying land. But the essence of the suit is I want to get paid for the wheat. It's not I want the land back. Okay, that could be a possible case. V'lo amrinin ela delo nachis aperi. That statement was only made when the dispute is over the pay rate. Okay, avo nachis aperi. But if he does enter the dispute based on the produce, okay, and then the land comes up in the course of the case, migo aperi, while they're negotiating and litigating about the produce, dina av puma ad gufa, they can also continue the case and deal with the land component without adjourning and him going to get permission from the wife. Okay, Hajan Allah ha-sholech. Okay, new Mishnah. This, we've mentioned several times that if Reuven owes Shimon money, Reuven gives Shimon one of two things: an undivided mortgage, meaning I have $100,000 worth of land, I owe you 10 grand, I will make my real estate holdings meshubed to the loan. That's one possibility. The other possibility is there's $10,000 loan. I'll take this designated little patch of land worth $10,000, and that's what's meshubed. We're not talking about that. There, if he didn't pay the loan, the creditor would get the designated part, no ifs, ands, or buts. One more piece of data we may remember: land is divided into three general categories: the best land, the middle land, and the crummy land. Okay, so now we're going to discuss when there's this undesignated global mortgage and the man defaults and similar cases, which land can the creditor come and claim? From which category of land? Okay. Hanezokin shaman lahen be'edis. If your ox gores me or eats my strawberries, we estimate the amount of damage, and the court, and then the claimant, the guy who was damaged, can take land from the best land you've got. Okay? Now, if it's a monetary loan, Ubalchov Bebeinanis, if you owe money to somebody and you default, he cannot take the best, he has to take from the average land. Okay? And next, the Ksubas Isha, you divorce your wife, and your land is meshubad to your obligation to her, usually 200 zuz, but Kohanim was 4. They negotiate a number from Ziburis. You can give your wife the swamp land. Okay? Reb Meir Aimer, Af Kesubas Isha Bebeinonis. Rebbe Meir was a proto-feminist, and he said women get from the average. Okay, new cases. Ein nefra'in b'nechasim mishubadim. Okay. B'makom sheyesh nechasim b'nechayim. Reuven borrows money from me. Reuven gives me a global shibud on his land, but it's a long-term loan. It's a 20-year loan. In the course of time, Reuven sells land to others. Now, the land he sells carries with it this mortgage. Now, so that if he gave everything away or sold everything, then a creditor could go to the people that bought from him and claim their money because the mortgage still is on the land. But if the owner retains some land equal to or greater in value than the amount of the loan, that's the only land that the creditor can go to, as long as it's equal to or greater than the value of the loan, even if afilu hein diziburis, even if he sold all the gorgeous corn, the grain growing crop and the beautiful orchard, and all he owns left is a swamp. But if you drain the swamp, you could build an apartment house. It has value if the total amount of the loan does not exceed the value of that ziburis land, the lousy land. That's the only thing you can claim. Okay. Ein nefra'in min nichse yesoimim ela min haziburis. If a man borrows money and dies, and now the creditors say we want our money, to the heirs, to protect the orphans, creditors in this case get downgraded from Beinonis to Ziburis, to the cheapest land. Okay? Next case. Ein moitzin la'achilas peiros. All right. This is a strange and difficult to understand case. Reuven owns a piece of land. He goes, he gets a job in Manhattan. Obviously, it was probably in Alexandria. And he goes for a period of years to do whatever he's doing out of town. And somebody comes and takes his property and purports to own it and sells it to an innocent third party. Now the original owner comes back from Alexandria and says, Schwartz, what are you doing on my land? This is not your land. I bought it from Abramowitz. But Abramowitz stole it from me. In the meantime, this guy fertilized, so now it's more productive. He harvested a couple of years worth. Maybe he built a house in the corner or a garden shack, whatever. When the original owner, the truthful owner, gets his property back, he cannot sue the holder in due course, who was not really owning it, for the value of the crops that he ate, or for the increased value he gave to the land by paving it or digging a well or building a building. He only gets back estimated by what it was worth when he gave it up. That's that case. And the next case, Lemazon ha'isha l'benais, when it comes to a woman or minor daughters, the husband dies, the Kesuba says the woman is entitled to food, clothing, housing, until she uses the fund of money, that's her Kesuba. And the daughters are entitled to food, money, and food support and housing until either they get married or they're 12 and a half from the estate. Now, again, if the guy had sold the best possible land during his lifetime, they can only collect from what's left, unless the amount that's left is insufficient for their needs. Then they could go to the buyer, because the ksuba is a mortgage on the husband's estate. Okay, so we'll read that. Lamazan ha'isha benos, to provide support for the woman and the daughters. Machnisin mishubadim, we cannot collect from encumbered properties. No, ein moitzin applies now to all of them. We do not collect from encumbered properties, mipnei tikkun ha'olam, for benefit of society. Okay, Gemara. Mipnei tikkun ha'olam. Now, the word mipnei tikkun ha'olam was only by the women and children. Oh, and the rest of the Mishnah. Hamoitzi Matziya lo yeshava. Mipnei tikkun ha'olam. If I find your wallet and it has $150 in it, and I give it back to you, and you say, there was 300 in it, I do not have to swear that I didn't take that money. And again, mipnei tikkun ha'olam. Now, since the Mishnah had mipnei tikkun ha'olam for the last two cases, the question is, are all the previous cases takanas, or are they derived from psukim? Okay, that's the first question the Gemara asks. Mipnei tikkun ha'olam, what do we benefit the world? It's a deraisa law. Diksiv meitiv sodehu umeitiv karmo yishalem. You pay from the very best of the land or from the very best of the produce. Omer Abaya lo, not so. Tzricha ela Rabbi Shmuel. The only reason we need to set this Mishnah is because of Rabbi Shmuel's unique position. The Aimer Midiraisa v'dinezik shaiminon. That on a biblical level, if you damage somebody's property or somebody's person, we estimate how much you owe and take it from the very best. Kamash Malan, so that teaches us mipnei tikkun ha'olam shmaninam b'demazik. So all right, according to the pasuk, it's in relationship to what was damaged. So if your bull trampled down or ate all the grain on the other guy's best property, he couldn't get away with giving you inferior grain. He's got to give you the best grain. But if he only splashed through your swamp, you can't, and knocked down your kid's treehouse, you can't claim his best land. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says according to Abaya. Kamashmalan, therefore the pasuk teaches us mipnei tikkun ha'olam shaminan b'demazik, that we assess it based on what the damaged properties category was. Okay, so therefore telling you that it always comes from the best is now a Takanas Rabbanan, and therefore Tikkun Olam goes all the way back to the first case. My Rebbe Yishmael, what's the logic behind Rebbe Yishmael? Desanya, we learn in the Brisa, Meitiv Sedehu, Meitiv Karmo Yishalem, pay back from the best and pay back from the best grapes in the vineyard. The suffix on the words karmoi or sodehu means his. So Rabbi Yishmael obviously thinks his means the guy damaged. Another possibility is his means the guy who's did the damage. So therefore, it would be global. It wouldn't matter the relative relationship. Mativ Sadehu Shel Nezik. The damaged part, the person who is damaged, what his best compares to the other guy's best. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, that's what Rabbi Yishmael said. But Rabbi Akiva thinks differently. Lo b'hakasav ella ligbos lenizikin min ha'idios. What the pasuk is telling us is that the damager has to pay from his best. And certainly, if a bull ran through the base of Mikdash and gored korbanos, you would have to give your finest animals in replacement. Okay. So now Rabbi Shmuel says it's relative to the relationship of what was damaged, right? For Rabbi Yishmael, what did Rabbi Yishmael say? Achal shemeina u'mishalem shemeina. If the ox eats the very best high quality superior durum wheat that's being saved for making matzah on Pesach, that's what you have to pay back your very best, okay? Achal b'chusha mishalem. If he eats the strawberries in the best strawberry patch, mishalem mishmaina, you have to give back from your best produce or your best strawberries. Okay? Rav Idi bar Avin, Rav Idi bar Avin says, b'maya skin, and exactly what are we talking about? Okay, Kegan sha'achla agruga ben arugos. You have rows of strawberries. The best strawberries are on the north side. Now the bull came along and ate the whole middle out of the patch, the strawberry patch. And we're not sure what ratio of better strawberries to not quite as good strawberries. Okay? If it's the absolute best strawberries, that's what he ate. Or it's the lesser strawberries that he ate. The mishalem le memetiv. So the Bezdin would make him give back. The bull ate 10 quarts of strawberries, a mixture. Like when you buy them, the gnarly white ones are on the bottom of the box and the gorgeous red ones are on the top. We would make you pay back all gorgeous red ones. Okay? Omarava ilu yadanan kechusha ochal. If we know for sure that the bull ate the crummy strawberries, mishalem mechusha, then you pay back from your own crummy strawberries. Hashta delo yadina. But over here, where we're not sure what the quality of what he ate was, mishalem shmeina, that you have to pay back from the absolute best. Why? Everybody should know a halacha. Everybody knows Motzei Mincha Reva Me'ala Haraya. I can't take away from you what is yours unless I can prove it, that it's mine. Now, if we don't know what the bull ate, how can I prove I'm entitled to the very best? So therefore, it had to be a takanas rabbanan that you get from the best. Everybody follow that? Okay. Now, we'll stop right there. What? Well, then you know. We said there were two cases. Either you know, and he pays back the equivalent of what you know, or you don't know, and he pays back from the best. But that distorts a standard rule that you can't claim without knowing. Correct, but he doesn't have a raya. The strawberries are gone. You can't cut the bull open and check what quality strawberries were. This is a way of proving it was a takana, that the word tikkun olam applies to everything in the Mishnah. Okay, you get me tomorrow, and then Yetz Hashem, Rav Shimon will be back Wednesday. So you plan on getting home early Wednesday. What?
Airline willing.
Yeah. Airline's willing, right. I was thinking of not bothering to learn Reuven Tuesday afternoon, but I'm not going to do that.
Independence Day.
What?
Independence.
I guess that she made it to Pennsylvania, huh?
But where we messed up, Reuven, is that each of those cases are separate. They're not linked.